Welcome, nature detectives. I'm Conrad Baker. I'm an outdoor educator with the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation at Letchworth State Park, and today I have a nature mystery for you. I had the misfortune of coming across this pricker bush here. I think using our nature tools, we can figure out what kind of plant this is and how it affects us every single day. We'll use two nature tools to do that, our eyes and our fingers. Of course, the first thing that I noticed were the prickles on this bush. If I very gently borrow one little twig. Let's see if I can break one off here. I can take a closer look at those thorns. And we don't see any leaves at this time of year, but the thorns themselves can be a giveaway. If you see that they kind of bend under my thumb. They don't stay exactly straight if I bend them. Lots of different kinds of pricker bushes and thorns have really woody thorns that don't bend easily under your thumb. Having bendy thorns like that is a really important tell. It's a really important nature clue. Second nature clue that we can use to figure out what this is by looking at those berries. You see all the hundreds of tiny little red berries on this plant? If I gently get one without getting prickled, you see, it's bright red, a bright red berry. These berries are not edible or tasty to humans. If we feel them very carefully with our fingers, it's pretty squishy. It feels kind of like a spoiling grape. Not dry like a raisin, but kind of getting there. It's a little bit squishy. It's not hard like a lot of other kinds of red berries that we'll see at this time of year. And then if we look at the size of the bush in general, do you see how I'm squatting down here so it's over my head, but it's not towering up into the sky like a tree? So we can see that it's a shrub-sized plant. It's not a huge tree, and it's not a little wildflower. Let's put all those nature clues together. We have a shrub that is not quite a tree, but definitely not a little wildflower. It has these fire engine red squishy berries this time of year, and the thorns are bendy under my thumb. This must be Japanese barberry. And Japanese barberry, with a name like that, as you can guess, did not originate in North America. This is a kind of a plant that comes from Asia, Eastern Asia. And coming from Eastern Asia, it has developed in an ecosystem full of insects and herbivores, plant-eating animals that depend on it, but those herbivores cannot survive here in North America. These plants are beautiful, and these wonderful little red berries stick around through the winter and make any garden look lovely and festive and beautiful even in the winter. But because those herbivores don't live here, these plants tend to escape from the gardens. The little seeds inside these berries tend to find their way into the natural environment and grow all over the forest floor. For example, here near the Humphrey Nature Center in Letchworth State Park, the whole forest floor in this area is covered with Japanese barberry. It's all over the forest floor behind me. That means that the barberry in the summer is shading the ground and keeping the sun from getting down to the very young little plants that are trying to grow and compete and survive in the forest. These are native plants that have lived here for millions of years. These barberry plants have not lived here for millions of years. They were only brought here by human beings to be part of our gardens. These barberry plants provide lots of good, dense, thorny cover for some small animals. Now, some of those animals are very helpful to us humans, like hooded warblers, for example. They're a small bird, a yellow and black bird, and they eat a lot of insects, some harmful caterpillars that can be pests in our gardens and farms. But even though the warblers can hide very well in these shrubs, so can white-footed mice. And white-footed mice get into our cabins and our homes and sometimes cause problems with our food. And they also can carry young ticks. And ticks, when they're very small, when they're larvae and nymphs, early in their lives, they depend on mice, and white-footed mice in particular, to carry them from place to place. They're a blood host that the tick can feed on and can feed on the blood and survive. They also depend on the mice to move them around to a new place. Those mice like to hide under the barberry. The ticks like to hop off the mice, climb out on the branches, and wait for their next host. Maybe that host will be a human being. And those ticks, besides sucking our blood and being kind of creepy and spooky, can also carry lots of diseases, including Lyme disease, which you might have heard of, which can have long-term health effects for humans. So it's safe to say that Japanese barberry has negative effects on its natural environment and on human beings, and that its native predators in Eastern Asia don't survive well here in North America. All those things together make Japanese barberry an invasive species. Invasive species is a species that doesn't have its natural controls, in this case herbivores, in play in North America, and it does harm to its natural environment and or does harm to human beings. Japanese barberry is an undesirable plant to have around. New York State has it on a high risk level of its threat assessment instrument. It's considered a high risk invasive species that New York State does not want to spread further. If you really want to put your nature detective skills to the test as nature detectives, you can try to find some Japanese barberry in your neighborhood. Look for those small red berries this time of year and those bendy thorns. Careful while bending those thorns. Once you find some, you can go to WesternNewYorkPrism.org. WNYPrism.org. That is the agency, the organization that likes to keep track of where these invasive species are in New York so that they can best counter them and try to prevent them from spreading further. Western New York Prism is an excellent resource along with Finger Lakes Prism. Those two Prism organizations are the two that we work with most closely here at Letchworth State Park. And there are invasive species monitoring organizations all across the country. If you go to WesternNewYorkPrism.org, you can fill out a field observation sheet. It's a worksheet where you can fill in the invasive species that you found and where they found them. And that can provide real important scientific data to Western New York Prism to help counter invasive species like Japanese barberry. Well, thank you so much for joining me for today's Nature Mystery. If you have any questions about Japanese barberry or other invasive species in Western New York, please put a comment in the comment section below the video. Share this video with your friends to put their nature detective skills to the test. And as always, like Letchworth State Park's Facebook page to stay tuned for more nature mysteries.